Candidates tournament has begun, and what a cracking start. I was actually hoping to be there in Yekaterinburg, but events took over and I'm still here in London and quite relieved, I have to say. Obviously, they're playing the tournament under very, very strange conditions, and it must be really difficult for all the participants and those organising the event as well. And I wish them all the very best. Let's keep our fingers crossed. But anyway, we had a fantastic start. We really did. And I'm going to take you through the game between Giri and Nepomniachtchi. This was just a fascinating game. It's quite a long game, but bear with me, and there is plenty of excitement here. First of all, let me just say what the time control is. It's 100 minutes for the first 40 moves, followed by 50 minutes for the next 20 moves, and then 15 minutes for the rest of the game, with an increment of 30 seconds per move from move one. So this is a serious event with a very serious, slow, classical time control. Now, this variation of the English. Well, it's hotting up right from move 6 with this move Queen B6. And this has been the subject of some very interesting battles in the past. And it looks very odd already to develop the queen at such an early stage. And also, you know, black starts playing around with this knight. It is really complex. Magnus Carlsen had this position a few years ago, 2009 against Dominguez, and he played Queen A4 here, which is completely crazy, but led to quite a quick draw. E3 from Giri, and this is all known. In fact, Giri has been on the black side of this position. Queen A4 was played against him, probably not a very good move. But H3 is the known continuation. So material is still even for the moment. Now black is a pawn up. And previously we've seen Queen B3 here, which leads to white regaining the pawn, and this position is about equal, this endgame. But Giri played Rook C1, which has been seen before in an obscure correspondence game. But already, you know, things are just a bit crazy. You know, should black take this pawn? That would be pawn number 2. This correspondence game went Queen A5, but that was better for white after B3. Nepo thought for almost 10 minutes and played D5. Well, that looks very sensible indeed to support the knight, claim some ground in the centre as well. And after B3, well, things start to get mad again. If black wants to, well, play a kind of sensible move, like just retreating the knight, why not? Then in fact, this actually presents black with a few problems. So white has won the pawn back, and actually you can see that black's king is about to be displaced, and perhaps with accuracy black may be okay here, but in practice this is a very tricky position, certainly much easier for white to play than black. Now, it was quite clear that Giri had researched this well. You don't go into such sharp positions on a whim, and that is not his style at all. So far he was playing very, very quickly, whereas Nepo was taking his time. So he thought for almost 20 minutes over bishop b4, which is actually a very good move. A temporary piece sacrifice. Pawn takes knight. And now rook a3, putting some pressure on the knight here. Giri still playing his moves very quickly. Bishop e5 protects the knight. That was knocked back, so with a sort of gain of tempo, bishop comes back to attack the queen, and now queen a5. So you can see there are 1, 2, 3 pieces attacking the knight on c3. There could be a chance to play e5 to push that bishop out of the way as well. For example, if pawn takes pawn, then e5 is actually simply very good for black because the king is going to be caught in the middle. So that's why Giri played bishop e2. Again, played very, very quickly. And after bishop takes, now here is what Giri sacked in exchange. So instead of taking here, which I think would just be better for black, he just slipped the king away. So this is a really interesting position. We're on move 19. Giri still playing very, very quickly, whereas Nepo was having to really, take stock and work things out for himself. So Giri has sacked an exchange. His king is relatively safe. It can always come out to g2. The rook stands on a semi-open file. Black's king, well, where is this going to be safe? Not clear at the moment. You could say the human move here is to take this pawn. Pawn takes pawn, but then g5. And this also opens up this diagonal. Now, this is a very unclear position, and if one has analysed this in advance, then that would give you quite an advantage over your opponent. There's also rook takes c4. That would be taken, and once again this move g5, opening up this diagonal. White's king is safe, black's king is not safe, and really unclear position, but white has the initiative, and that is dangerous. And Nepo thought for, well, it says here about 9 minutes. I'm not quite sure how accurate the timings are, but anyway, for let's say roughly 10 minutes. And he played b4. Now that is a very unusual move. As I said, the natural move is to somehow take on c4. And here is where Giri started thinking for the first time, and he thought, well, let's say roughly 20 minutes over his next move. So obviously, to some extent, he was on his own at this moment at, well, move 19. Now, he still has the initiative, but he was obviously slightly thrown by this. g5. Now, if that's taken, then this is excellent for black. Excellent for white. I'm losing already. We're not even through the first round, and I'm losing it. This is excellent for white, because the rook is going to crash in, and then there'll be bishop h5 check and so on. So after g5, Nepo played e5. Good move. So that puts the question to the bishop, which took the rook. And now g takes f6. Well, what a mad position on the board. Really, it's chaotic. This pawn stands here, right in the heart of white's territory. This diagonal is, this diagonal to h5 is open. The rook is active. There's something going on here. Nepo, made these next moves pretty quickly, whereas Giri was taking his time now. And if pawn takes pawn, then queen takes pawn, and then it's not so easy for white to get to this one. It's a mad position with, well, you can see these pieces from black haven't actually moved yet in the game. Giri played queen b1. So that's looking at the h-pawn. It discourages black from castling kingside, if you see what I mean. And looks like quite a nice move because it protects the a-pawn, prevents queen takes pawn, and is potentially active on the b file. But queen c7 was an excellent response from Nepo, simply protecting the h-pawn and kind of consolidating, just kind of keeping a lid on things. Now, chances are still balanced here. If I can show you, for example, there's a couple of continuations for white, but queen b5 check is possible. And then, well, let me show you a forced draw. This is quite good fun here, and in this case you can give this rook, and this is a draw by perpetual check. Well, this isn't absolutely forced, but basically it's a plausible continuation. Basically what I'm saying is white is all right here, but queen d3 from Giri, he probably overlooked Nepo's next move, which is b5. I have to say, looking at this kind of wild position with strange tactics, I think this plays into Nepo's strengths, actually. These dynamic positions with strange moves. And b5 is an excellent move. Well, obviously, if that gets taken, then the queen will be supporting this pawn advancing. So queen takes pawn on c3, eliminating that dangerous pawn. Now, with these beautiful pawns, it's essential that Giri breaks up these pawns, so therefore e4. So that's taken. Now, it's possible to take here, but, well, basically black is a pawn up there and has some chances. So Giri was looking for something clearer, and I think rook h4 is not a bad move. So, finally, on move 28, Nepo has castled. Now, let's just take stock for a moment. You can see that he has an extra pawn. And it's not a bad pawn, this passed pawn on c4. But also, these pawns do give his king a bit of protection as well. And here, Giri took on c4, but it might have been better just to swing the rook across here and leave this queen blockading. It's very hard to say. Giri took on c4, but this did seem to lead him into a spot of trouble. Well, obviously, if bishops are exchanged, well, it's even pawns, that's just going to be a draw very quickly. But king g7 keeps some tension in the position. And although material is now even, it's actually surprisingly difficult for white to escape this pin in a kind of satisfactory way. An obvious move like queen d3 runs into a pin here. So Giri played queen b3, but then rook b8, and suddenly black has this initiative. If queen a4, bishop d7, this is nasty, very nasty. For example, if queen d1, then bishop f5. You can give a check and threat of rook b1, say here, and well, and black is the exchange up. That's typical of these kind of tactics. The back rank is weak. This diagonal is weak as well. I meant this one. That's better. It's tricky. So basically, at this moment, after rook b8 just played to attack the queen, Giri decided to give up his queen. And this is probably not a bad practical decision. Having said that, there's only one side that can play for a win here. Black is obviously better. Normally with rook and bishop, against a rook and pawns on the same side of the board, this should be a draw. But there's still a few adventures, and this move from Nepo, h5, certainly puts a big question to white already. So do you keep your rook on this side of the board, or do you move up? Well, if rook here, then I think it's essential to bring this bishop round back to the king side. This is one way of trying to secure a draw, but it certainly doesn't guarantee a draw. Black can try and push these pawns. Giri tried rook g8, but now his pieces were just a little bit scattered. At the moment, of course, it's a good thing to have this bishop securely protected by the pawn. But the bishop is kind of the wrong side of the board, and you can see that, well, white's forces are split. If the rook had maintained its position on h4, then maybe you just ditch the a pawn and bring the bishop back. This is a very different situation. And suddenly, black has some initiative. If we can blow up white's king position, then that is dangerous. Dangerous for white, of course. And here they reach the time control. Nepo, as ever, was moving relatively quickly. Giri was running a little bit short of time. And here, for example, if rook d5, then e3 is excellent for black. Both these pawns will drop, and then it should be winning for white, for black. So bishop d1 played, and rook d5, and now here an excellent move from Nepo, giving up this pawn. But now he can get this pawn duo rolling down the board. I mean, it's, in a sense, this pawn on h4 is actually irrelevant. If these pawns start to roll, then white's king is going to be caught in a mating net. So here is where Giri had to compromise again. And he gives up his bishop. But of course, he's trying to get a fortress, and black only has one pawn left. If that pawn disappeared, then basically white would be able to rejoin the rook with the king, and that's a draw. But this is very tricky. Now, I don't know whether this is a win or a draw in a theoretical sense, but we do know it's very difficult for white. Particularly how Nepo played, because Nepo's technique was really good. So he's trying to create as much disturbance as possible here. Now this is an excellent move, queen d1. If the king is allowed to settle on e2, then it's probably a draw, and well, I'll show why in a second. So here again is a very important moment. If queen takes pawn, then the king can come around to e2, and it looks as though that position will be a draw. The rook would simply switch back and forth between g3 and e3, and it seems impossible for black to make progress. So after rook g3, this is an excellent move, queen h5. It means that if the king comes here, then you can still keep the king away from e2 and e1. And yeah, we'll see why it's important to do that in a second. So rook a3. And again, if queen takes h4, then king f1. That's the only move to draw, but it's good enough. But queen d5, this is excellent. It means that if king f1, then queen d1 check. have to say, Nepo was playing these moves very quickly. He clearly understood this position really superbly. So queen d5 and king back to g1, stepping out of the diagonal. Now, Nepo moves the king forward. Giri just has to wait with his rook. The king comes forward and the queen comes back. So there's a bit of shuffling goes on here. Queen d2, excellent, preventing the king coming to these squares. And basically this is, white is in a kind of Zugzwang now. White has to give ground. If the rook goes this way, then I think that'll be fatal. Basically, the queen will come here. So the rook has to keep on the third rank. This is very delicate stuff, but basically this king wants to cross to take this pawn and then reset again. And white can't prevent that, actually. You know, if the rook were, let's say, to come here, then it's going to be a very easy win because black will be able to play here and, well, at the very least exchange pawns, and then that's winning. So rook h3. So the king crosses. It's a laborious process, but I have to say Nepo played this phase of the game absolutely superbly. And basically this is Zugzwang. Giri has to give up this pawn. And the king now has to cross over to this side of the board. At the moment it's trapped, but this is Zugzwang again, because if king h2, for example, queen here, and then king h4, white is simply running out of moves there. So in this position, the rook has to move, allowing the king back. Now, black's plan is to cross over with the king. A little bit of prep first. And this was the final move of the game, queen d3. Here, Giri resigned. So, right, why did he resign? Let's just look at this carefully. First of all, what happens if the queen is taken? Well, in that case, the pawn is rolling through with the support of black's king. So that's winning. Fine. What happens if white waits? Well, then the king rolls in. Well, here, this is winning straight away, because in this position, we can simply transpose into a winning king and pawn endgame. Obviously, that pawn drops, and that's winning. Okay, let me show it for you. Here, and there we go. And if we go back, so this position, let's just see that one again. Basically, yeah, if rook h3 instead, then the king rolls in, and you can see that this is completely winning. I mean, white is in Zugzwang now. If, well, for example, king g1, we can even take here again and transpose into another winning king and pawn endgame, because that queens would check. Let's come back. So you can see that the whole point of this is to allow the king to cross over and into the position. Now, if white's king had been on e2 or e1, this would simply not be possible. There wouldn't be any way for black to make progress. So that's why ages back, or all the way through this endgame, actually, Nepo was so careful not to allow white's king to cross over. His understanding of this endgame was brilliant, I have to say. So there we go. Incredible. Anish Giri loses with white in the first round. Fascinating game. I should say there was another decisive game. Ding lost against Wang Hao. What a shocker in the old Chinese battle. Incredible stuff. So we're off to a cracking start. The other two games were drawn. Grishuk stood very well against Alexienko, but well, got into serious time pressure and only drew. And Caruana had quite a promising position against MVL, but Maxime actually played very sensibly and steered the game towards a draw. Well, it's early days. It's a marathon, not a sprint, but we're off to an absolutely fantastic start. Do look out for my video reports after each round. Thanks for watching.